The government won't help you here. It's Mexico.
2 hours is apparently the amount of time that I had left until I was going to die, according to a Mexican doctor. What's going on, folks? My name's Ollie, and today I'm going to talk to you all about the time that I nearly died in Mexico, and how all of a sudden I grew up and realized how precious life is. I'd say that this was the first time in my life that I had felt true fear, and I was all of a sudden aware of all of the responsibilities and the commitments that I had, even as a young 19-year-old boy. I know you all hear a lot about the security concerns in Mexico and how it's really unsafe for tourists and foreigners. As a bit of context, I was staying with my ex-girlfriend, who is Mexican, and we were staying in Puebla, which is a reasonably sized city. Yeah, obviously she spoke fluent Spanish, and we were actually staying in a flat with like 2 of her best friends in a pretty good neighborhood, right? So by this point, I'd maybe been in Mexico for, let's say, about a week and a half, about 10 days. And the night before, we had a few friends around, we were having a few drinks, a few beers, like nothing too crazy. From what I remember, we finished up at around 11, half 11. It was kind of just a chill, nice night, nothing too much. But I remember distinctly that when I woke up, I had a killer headache, which was so strange because it's a bit of a special skill, a bit of a special talent, but I never get hangovers. And at the time, I just kind of attributed it to this really strong Mexican alcohol that I'd never tasted before. And I was like, okay, this is noted for future reference. But things started to feel like too much of a coincidence when the 2 other flatmates came into the room and said that their heads were killing. So I kind of got up out of the bed as best as I could, because by this point I was actually feeling quite rough. I opened the main door that led into the kitchen, and the smell of gas hit me. Now, the thing that I can really compare the smell to is when you're a little bit younger and you're in science class, you're playing around with the Bunsen burners, you forget to light it, and for the past 5-10 minutes or whatever, there's just gas flowing into the classroom till anybody notices. Or conversely, if you've got a gas stovetop and you leave the gas on, it kind of floods the kitchen until somebody notices. Think of that smell and amplify it like 10,000 fold, and you're about halfway to the actual reality in our kitchen. And by this point, it was very clear there had been some sort of gas leak. So we open all the doors, we open all the windows, we try and get out, try and get a bit of fresh air, but we're still feeling worse. Now, I don't know why, but for some reason, my ex-girlfriend called the landlord. I remember the landlord came with like a load of maintenance people, and then they said, oh yeah, there's been a gas leak. So confirming the obvious there, but it's fine. And I think my fear was just amplified by this point because everybody was speaking Spanish and I didn't really know what was going on. So not only was I kind of deluded by this gas that had been filling my room for the past 8, 9, 10 hours, but I was also confused by a serious language barrier. But of course, by this point, the landlord was kind of culpable. So he called somebody else who came and took us all, there's 4 of us, they took us all to a hospital, right? So the 4 of us, still in our pajamas, trail down the flight of stairs, and we walk out onto the street, and we look awful. And we're waiting on the street for like 15-20 minutes, just getting worse, until this tiny car, it looked like a clown car, pulls up on the side. And apparently, the 4 of us are supposed to fit in. So we bundle our bodies into the back of the car. And at this point, I am really panicking. This was my first kind of big trip away. Kind of instinctively, I guess, I phoned my mum. And then just before she was going to pick up, I hang up. And I'm so glad I did that, because that would have been such a bad idea. She was 12 hours across the other side of the world. And what was she going to do? A little bit of time passes. We're kind of on the freeway, and this massive hospital appears in the distance. We're like, okay, good. We're going to go to this. It looks quite modern. I mean, I'm not sure what the Mexican healthcare standards were like at that point. So I was like, okay, that looks all right. We drive past this nice hospital and we go into the worst, most dodgy street I think I've ever seen. This was a stark contrast to where we were living, which was in quite a nice neighborhood. But as it turns out, most of Mexican healthcare is privatized. And obviously, since the landlord would be paying for our treatment, they took the cheapest option, which is no surprise really, considering they took the cheapest option when it came to installing the gas pipes. But it's fine, we move on. So we turn up to the dodgiest hospital I've ever experienced in my life. And I have no idea what's going on because everything is still in bloody Spanish. And words won't actually do justice how bad this hospital was. But whatever, we're waiting in the waiting room, there's water dripping from the ceilings. I'm gonna be honest, the roof looked like it was gonna cave in. It was not an ideal time. And all of a sudden, the doctor confirmed what we had kind of expected by this point, which was that we all had pretty severe carbon monoxide poisoning. And if any of you have ever been unlucky enough to experience this for yourself or know anything about it, that the only treatment that doctors and nurses can really give you is just oxygen therapy to replace the deficit in your bloodstream. The only thing they did have was an oxygen mask that we had to share between the 4 of us. And, obviously being the heroic figure I am, I let the 3 other girls use the oxygen mask before me, and eventually I got a little bit of a huff on it. But we are in luck. There is a second part to this hospital. There is another floor hidden behind a staircase. So I think to myself, how can this possibly get any worse? This must be like the fancy, posh, private part of the hospital that they've been hiding for the whole time. And whilst this was true to an extent, we did get our own oxygen mask. By this point, I'm split up from my friends. And this is very bad because they are the ones that speak Spanish and were doing all the translation between the non-English speaking doctors and the English speaking me. So by this point, I am in an isolated hospital room in the very back corner of this second floor. Oh yeah, the lights don't work, by the way. So it's also pitch black, but it gets worse. But for some reason, they also placed us on the psychiatric ward. So imagine this scene. I'm laying down on the bed with an oxygen mask that is way too small for me. It keeps falling off my face, in the pitch black. And in the not so distant room next to me is a man screaming. Now this screaming is unlike anything I have ever heard before in my life. Now I had no idea what this guy was saying. All I know is that there were like 4 or 5 or 6 doctors trying to restrain this guy onto the bed. But after being instructed to keep huffing on this oxygen for 2 hours, a doctor comes into the room and oh my goodness, she speaks English. So with the screaming still going on in the pitch black bedroom, she sits down on the edge of the bed and says, "You are going to be fine. But 2 more hours and you would have been dead." Now, a little bit of time passed and fortunately we didn't have to stay in the hospital overnight. Needless to say, we didn't return back to the same apartment that nearly killed us. But I'm not really sure what the main takeaway of this story is. I don't think it's that from this point, I never travel anywhere without packing one of these. A carbon monoxide alarm. But I think it's that for the first time in my life, I kind of felt responsible for my own life. For all the time before, I was kind of in a bubble, like protected by my friends and my family and my comfort zone. But this time I traveled somewhere else and things hadn't gone to plan, and actually things went really badly. But conversely, I'm not saying that you should never step out of your comfort zone. There's loads of videos on this channel where we talk about the merits and the benefits of stepping out of your comfort zone and taking risks. But at the same time, there's always a piece of you that is mindful of the dangers that are out there. But I think there's a balance. I think that you have to take risks, but also not take too many risks. You have to stay alive because otherwise I wouldn't be here today telling you guys this story, or my friends or my family. Well, I hope you enjoyed this little tale of the time that I nearly died, and well, one of the times that I nearly died, but that's a different story for another day. And maybe you took a little bit from it. But if not, that you just enjoyed hearing a little bit of my time in Mexico and my experiences with the healthcare system over there. But if one of your goals for this year is to step outside of your comfort zone a little bit and take a few more risks, perhaps not as big as this, then check out this video where we talk all about how and why you should apply for summer camp. But that's all for today, folks. Please subscribe and I'll see you all soon.